Hello once again to everyone that's joining. Just give it 1 or 2 more minutes there. Give everyone a chance to get in for the event this evening. Ready to crack on. I am keeping an eye out just in case anyone can't use the chat for whatever reason. Just making sure that I'm getting everyone in as we go. Obviously, we've got a lot of participants joining at the moment. So as soon as it seems to be looking like everyone's kind of getting through the queue, we'll get cracked on. Ready from there. I appreciate we're just getting to dot on 6 o'clock, but I'm getting a few notifications through saying people are trying to join the call still. So I'll just give it 1 more minute and then we'll get cracking from there. Feel free to use the chat and everything to get to have a few conversations with everyone. Just give it 1 more second there, get a couple of people in because I'm still getting notifications coming through from Zoom. It'd be really handy if the admit all button actually worked the way it's supposed to. Can someone just give me a thumbs up and let me know if you can see the screen okay? I've just had a couple of people say they're getting connection issues. Perfect. Cheers. Right, okay, it's starting to slow down just a little bit, so I'm going to get cracked on with the event for the evening now. First of all, thank you to everyone for coming. The social code, for those of you who don't know, is something that I've been working on for about 3 months now. I'll get around to introducing myself in a second for those who've not come across me before, but thank you for being part of our launch this evening. It's something that I've been really excited to work with for a while now, and we've got some fantastic speakers here this evening as well. So I'm really looking forward to kind of them sharing their opinions and their knowledge with everyone to get going for the evening. With regards to the social code, I just wanted to do a quick little introduction to kind of explain what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. So just as a little overview of kind of how we're doing things at the moment and what's kind of going on with this event. I have sort of run meetups for a couple of years, and this is something that's, you know, very much new to a lot of people that I've been working with on this meetup, but it's something that I've done for a while. I make no sort of aversions to it. I've worked in the recruitment industry for just shy of 3 years now. I appreciate everything that developers do. They have created a fantastic sense of community. And as someone who works in this industry, I'm really keen to create something to give back to the community. I'll be the first to say that this is something that I like to call sort of a safe zone from recruiters. Don't worry, no one's going to be sitting here spamming you about a job or anything like that. This is very much a safe zone for people to come and learn new ideas. The idea behind this is by providing access to new ideas, you can kind of take those thoughts and run with them with your own decision away from this event further on, sort of going forward. I was also really keen to create a group where everyone was welcome with regards to, no matter what level you're at, no matter sort of what your background is, you are more than welcome to join this group. If you've got any interest in technology whatsoever, then this is something that we're more than happy for people to kind of contribute to. That being said, allowing everyone to contribute, I am really keen to create a network like I have done with meetups that I've run previously, where anyone and everyone is allowed to contribute. If you've got something that you'd be interested in talking about, some opinions that you'd like to share, or just something that you'd like to see, please do reach out. This is very much an event that's for the community, by the community. I'm just here to facilitate it and to provide the infrastructure to run it. I would like people to go ahead and show whatever they would actually like to see. We're also going to create an opportunity for you to socialize afterwards, should you choose to do so. I'll leave the Zoom running. I know in the past we've had some fantastic evenings, afterwards. So feel free to stick around and have a chat with anyone there if you would like to. And sort of last but not least, we're quite keen to make this interactive. Anything that we've got on this evening, we are really keen for it to be interactive, for anybody to sort of ask any questions. Feel free to use the chat function at any time to get yourself, involved with the event. Quickly, for those of you who've not come across me before, I'm Ross Townsend. I'm a .NET specialist at Oscar. I've worked in this market for a few years. If you've got any interest in catching up with me on any form of social media or anything like that, they're all here ready for you to go. But realistically, I couldn't have done this without a few other people helping me out with the infrastructure side of things. So if your name is on here, please do just give us a quick wave, as I owe you a massive thank you for helping me get the infrastructure side of this thing sorted for the evening. Like I said before, I'm really keen for this to be something that the community get involved with and the community help participate with. So if you are interested in getting involved with the infrastructure for this meeting, then please do drop me a message and we'll take things from there. My DMs are always open to anyone who wants to get involved in the community. Without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce our speakers for the evening, if they can just give us a little wave. First up tonight, we've got Aiden Bell. We've also got Martin Mayer and Rachel Morgan Trimmer, who I've just seen join. Oh, there you are. Hi, Rachel. I'm going to hand straight over to Aiden now, who's going to kick us off for the evening. I'm really excited for this. I've seen Aiden's talks before, and he's definitely a very entertaining human being. So I'll hand over to you from there, Aiden, if you want to start sharing your screen. One sec, I've put you on mute and I've disabled your ability to screen share. Give me one. That's not a good start.
I don't know if being an entertaining human being is what I'm after there, but I'll take it, Ross.
There you go, Aiden. You should be good to go to share your screen now.
Let's try this nonsense here. Right, okay. Okay, let me know which window you see, because it might not be the one I intend to share. Can you see? I
can see a PowerPoint that's not actually open. It's just sort of the standard PowerPoint. It's like not presenting mode.
Yeah, I'm not going to full screen it. I've got an ultra wide monitor, and I think that'll just confuse everybody. So can you see my face, and you can't see the next and current slide and the presenter notes and stuff, can you?
No, we can literally see your face, but it's quite a small slide.
Okay, hang on, I can make it bigger. Is that better?
Nothing's changed yet.
It's large on my end, is it?
It's portrait view. Someone's just put in the chat that we can see.
It's portrait view.
Yes. No. It's basically it's what we can see is the Google Slides presentation, but it's very much a vertical view that we can see.
A vertical view. Is there a list of slides on it?
Yeah, there's a list of slides going from 1 to 11.
Right, that's fine. That's the wrong window. That's fine.
That'll be why
we'll find the right one. is this just a slide on its own?
That is just a slide on its own. We are all good to
perfect. Go. We're there. All the window titles have the same title. That's quite confusing.
No worries. For anyone who's interested in asking questions, just before we start, I forgot to mention before, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll run them by Aiden at the end as a Q&A. All right. Cheers, Aiden.
Okie dokie. Right. So the title of this talk is hiring. How can we hire better in software? A cry for help by me. This is having spent the last 2 years getting really interested in hiring best practice, recruitment, anything I can get my hands on. Basically, I was a lead developer and then became an engineering manager and was responsible for hiring and building teams, and spoke to a lot of other people that were engineering managers. And, you know, there's a familiar trajectory of programmer, senior programmer, lead programmer, you know, all the way up. And nobody really warns you. You're going to have to hire people, and it's a skill all on its own. So I got really interested in it, realized I had this massive skills gap, and just found it fascinating how to hire, how to build teams, and basically came across a bunch of stuff that we do wrong pretty consistently, and it's really frustrating. So this it's a cry for help / rant. If anybody disagrees with me, you know, has any feedback or anything, I'd really like to hear it. Ross has got all the details, and they've been on the LinkedIn posts and whatnot. But that's really important. This is just me talking. I'm probably wrong, and if I'm wrong, please do correct me. So one of the first things, and probably the most important thing really, is that hiring is an act of discrimination. You have a pool of people that want a job, and you have to pick one. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to say, I'm going to pick this person or I'm going to pick that person. And there's so many variables involved that it's extremely difficult, especially if you've not done hiring before. If you're a new engineering manager, you know that's your ultimate task, is to discriminate against a pool of people and pick somebody for a role. And we do this by filtering predominantly. So we decide there's some ideal human being that we want to join our team, and we create a template of this person in a job spec, or you know, just in our mind, we go, this is the person we want, and we create a filter that we want to try and find this person in a pool of candidates. Recruiters and HR departments, they try and help us out with this. And what you ultimately end up with looks like this. It looks like the hole in the wall game. So this ideal template of a person, it doesn't really exist. We know it doesn't exist. It's idealized. Our selection parameters are usually incorrect for filtering people out and deciding who to hire. Candidates also distort themselves to game the system if they're good in the hiring market. You know, we all know that you tailor your CV to suit a given role and things like this. And our selection criteria doesn't really relate to the risk of a hire failing quite often. So what we end up with is a sort of template, a cardboard cutout of a person, and we try and fill this role, which is really great if you're hiring factory workers in the Victorian period, or, you know, manual laborers, or an army of soldiers. You know, it's extremely good for getting a very uniform team of people. Here's a cookie cutter shape of a person I want, and we're going to find somebody that best fits through this cookie cutter shape. We also write our job specs quite often in the same way that we would write job specs for these kinds of roles. Here's a comical example. It's obviously exaggerated, but it's an advert for a chef demanding that a chef has expertise in chef's trousers, in pan, in carrot and or onion, and in a specific pale blue KitchenAid mixer. The point of this is what we tend to do with job specs and trying to make this cookie cutter shaped person is we just list the tools that we use. We want somebody that uses React. We want somebody that knows JavaScript and these kind of things. And we just list out tools. It's really common. Here's one job ad, which is beautiful, really. It's just listing tools. If you know these tools, come and get in touch. This job ad says nothing about whether you're a good software developer, about what kind of personality attributes you need to bring along. It's just a list of tools. And if you're fortunate enough to work with a company that's very good at hiring, you don't see a lot of this, but there's a lot of it. There is a hell of a lot of just job adverts that are lists of tools. If you know these tools, you are right for this job. And that cookie cutter shape is really bad at finding and hiring decent people for an engineering team. So we go back to this, idea that we create a cookie cutter shape by listing tools. Tools aren't skills. They're just not skills. Above, I've put a list of skills, has a good engineering mindset, can design new language syntax, is an excellent communicator. They're skills. In most job ads, when we're hiring, we're listing tools as skills. If I'm hiring for a software development team, even if we use Python or JavaScript or Django or React, I really don't care if the applicant knows these things up front. They're just tools. A software developer's skill set should be the ability to pick up and learn new tools. So I don't care whether somebody knows the tools that we use. One of the primary skills of a software developer is being able to deal with new tools. They change so frequently that you have to be. So we're already stuck in that we're deciding the cutout for our ideal person is just a list of tools rather than a list of skills. So we go back to our job description here. Must have experience in React, JavaScript, Node. Must be good at writing HTML and turning UI designs into working interfaces using CSS. That is not the ideal person, even if that's what their job entails. It says nothing about the person that you want to hire, only that they know existing skills. And this is fine, but you end up with a very over-selected filter for people. And in software, we know that our job isn't, like a mill worker or a brickie or a soldier. We know that our jobs have a lot of dimensions. It's nothing against brickies or soldiers, but it's designing software is part science, it's part art, it's part psychology. There's so much that goes into it. Intuitively, we know it's not as simple as the simple cutout that we try and make in our job specs and things. So we think, okay, the obvious the problem must be that this shape is too simplistic. Our job spec is too simplistic. So we add on more filtering, more criteria onto this, and we end up with a more complicated hole in the wall that we're trying to force candidates to climb through. Intuitively, we think that increasing the complexity of our selection criteria will increase the quality of the candidates that we get. So if I list more of the tools we use, I'm going to get a closer fit to my ideal team member. In my experience, this isn't true. And we're not building a team of individuals that are all the same. There's very little value in having a software team where everybody's the same anyway. We think that this more complicated filtering with just, let's just list more of the tools, produces a better version of a simplified filtering mechanism. In reality, it doesn't. Let's say that the filtering we used is right, and we get people applying for the job that they know JavaScript and we use JavaScript, or they know TypeScript and we use this, or they know that and we also use that. The failure modes in hiring very rarely boil down to tooling. I've really tried to find instances of people that have lost their job or been moved elsewhere or been fired because, for example, they knew JavaScript, but they really just couldn't pick up React, you know, or they knew such and such a database, but they just couldn't understand this new one. People don't fail in the workplace or fail integrating into teams or fail to perform because they can't pick up tools. So why are we going to such lengths when we advertise for jobs and hire people to filter them based on the tools they know and they don't? It doesn't make any sense. If you ask around, you know, why did such and such a person get fired? Why didn't we want them in the team? From different teams and hiring managers, you know, it's usually things like they're uncooperative, or, you know, they lied about their own capability, or they refused to seek help, or, you know, these sort of interpersonal issues. It's very rarely about the tools. So what we're left with is we're filtering on things that don't really matter anyway. You know, if somebody's got a good engineering mindset, they're a solid developer, they can pick up the language that they need to, and that's fine. Taking it a bit further into what makes hires fail, if you like, or not be a good fit, it's a cultural failing. We're hiring based on a criteria that doesn't account for culture. So you get somebody joining a team and they don't quite understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we discuss things, what our objectives are. And it increases the chance that a hire will be a bad hire. I don't think there is an actual bad hire, but it increases the chance of a bad hire. Again, it's nothing to do with the tools. It's nothing to do with the things we put in job specs, usually. And it's nothing to do with our selection criteria. So what are we doing? In an ideal world, to me, to my mind, a software engineering team looks more like the pictures in the bottom than the pictures in the top. You know, it's more like a band or an orchestra, or people fixing old cars, or, you know, these kind of collaborative, creative endeavors than just let's put some bricks on top of other bricks and build walls, or let's march in a straight line, or let's keep producing lengths of fabric. There's much more to software. So we need a hiring method and a job advertising method that makes the most of describing what software is in practice and what the real world criteria are for a good fit in your team. It all starts with the culture of your team. In my experience at the SMB level, there's a lot of a lack of defining culture in terms of what it means for hiring. There's a lot of companies that are doing it well, but for me, in my experience, taking on teams and things is quite often it's missing. And you can't hire effectively if you don't have a solid culture to hire for. Because aside from the baseline of, you know, must be a decent engineer in some language or have, you know, some vague experience, they must be capable. Fit usually boils down to culture and integration and, you know, interpersonal things. So step one is developing a solid culture. And ideally, we all know we'd want a culture that values skills and experience, creativity, innovation, inclusion, diversity, cooperation, debate, problem solving, engineering, caring, patience, understanding, all these kind of things. A lot of these things are not things that are communicated through the way we filter candidates into new positions. The way we write job adverts as hiring managers, I suppose, or develop job specs and hire reflects that it's really difficult to hire based on culture and based on people. It's dead easy to filter people out because they don't know JavaScript, or they don't know Python, or they don't know Django, or they don't know this and that. Those are really easy, low risk quite engineering ways to filter people out. It's sort of a Boolean thing. You either know this or you don't. You have experience in this or you don't. Whereas the harder things to filter for and hire for are things like interpersonal fit, cultural fit, the experience that they're bringing to the team. But the human risks, the harder things, are usually the reason people don't fit into a team, because the culture of the team has failed to support them. When I first went from lead developer to engineering manager and had to hire, it was a really horrible shock. I'm not qualified to do this. I am a software developer. I am not qualified to make a decision as to whether somebody should join this team or not. I can say whether they know a language or whether they know a framework, but that's not the same as whether they should join the team. And it was absolutely frightening. You know, what if this turns out wrong? What if they don't get on? Especially in a small team, you know, hiring poorly can have a big impact. You know, I'm a programmer, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist. I don't necessarily have the proper training to make a value judgment on somebody outside the tools they know and the things they don't. And also, there's this feeling that they're the only things that you should be able to discriminate on. You know, it's not fair to hire, you know, not hire somebody for reasons other than them not having the relevant experience in a very narrow thing that's to do with their job. Even though the reasons that job hires are usually deemed poor is not to do with the tools. By the same token, we know that just hiring people we like in interviews isn't good enough. I don't think it's good enough, but I think it's a very common approach. If somebody meets the cookie cutter shape of knowing this language and knowing a certain bunch of tools, really the only thing that's left is to work out if we like them. And this is sort of a replacement for, are they going to be a good fit, and making an actual assessment of how well they'll fit into the team. My personal gut feeling of whether I like somebody really shouldn't be too much of a factor in whether they're hired for employment or not. But this is a really common theme of interviews. People saying, oh, we interview you down at the pub so we can have a really nice friendly chat and blah, blah, blah. And it usually means I'm trying to work out if I like you enough to hire you. And that's not good enough. That's not scientific enough to me. That's not specific enough. We get to a point where we have to accept that hiring is discrimination, but it is also active and informed inclusion. We're making an effort to include somebody. Too much of hiring and the language we use and the way we go about our processes is trying to filter people out rather than making the best effort we can to filter them in. So, for example, you know, requiring somebody knows Python to join my team of Python developers is not an act of active and informed inclusion. If we were to make it that way, we'd appreciate that if you know a loosely typed language and you've got experience with, say, JavaScript or Lua or something like that, you'd probably be able to pick up Python and join the team and be productive. So rather than hiring being discriminating and picking one person, it should be the act of trying to include as many people and the most people as we can in our team to fulfill our purpose. As a hiring manager, that's a really scary idea. The idea of active inclusion being different from discrimination. I can discriminate really well. I can say, you don't know Python, you're not joining my team. And that's very safe. I'm not going to get fired if that person doesn't fit in with the team or there's any problems. I've, you know, hired somebody that knew Python for a Python role. What could possibly go wrong? So we have to look at hiring as a human event. You know, we're making an effort to include people as much as possible and accept that failing is okay. Failing is perfectly okay. It's okay to hire somebody and it not work out. It's okay to take a gamble on bringing a C# developer into a team of Java developers and seeing what happens. We try and eliminate the risks associated with hiring when we should be accounting for the risks properly and allowing us to make braver decisions, especially at the small to medium business level, with how we hire. So we need to reorder the risks. We need to hire first, thinking about what kind of teams we want to build. We don't want monocultured, cardboard cut out, everybody's the same, homogenous software development teams. It brings little value. People don't challenge each other as much. And quite often the right solution to specific business problems or engineering problems isn't found. So we have to hire for diversity, we have to hire for cultural fit, and we have to develop a team culture that supports the widest amount of people possible, so that it's not so much of a risk to hire a C# developer into a Java team. There's a lot of businesses that do this really well, or at least better than just listing tools on a job description. And I've tried to look at what some of the properties that make it good. We don't really have a framework. I don't feel as a hiring engineering manager that there's a readily available framework to tell us how to write a job spec, how to filter people out, how to assess people for different teams and different situations. I'm an engineer. I can, if you asked me to write a job spec when I first started as an engineering manager, I would have just listed the tools we use. It's so ineffective. The most effective ways I've seen is job ads that just describe the company culture, they describe what you do, they describe why you do it, they describe the team, the role, how performance is assessed, and they seem to hire for happiness and profit, because they understand that really a happy team is a profitable, productive team. And also, they don't baby the candidates. When you list tools and you filter people out rather than trying to actively include people, you baby candidates. They're adults. They can decide whether they're fit for a role. They can decide whether you're the appropriate team to join. They're responsible adults with feelings and can take responsibility for fitting in with the team. We don't have to, interrogate people about whether they understand the meta object model of JavaScript to join an engineering team that's building just business web apps. Let the candidates decide whether they're appropriate for the role. First and foremost, it's a shared responsibility. The end. That's it. It's more of a rant than anything else, but it's trying to start the conversation of acknowledging we're not creating a Victorian warehouse full of people doing the same tasks. We're not just listing tools on job specs in order to filter out the right or wrong candidate, because most of the time we're missing the right candidates by doing that. We want a happy team of diverse people challenging each other in a good cultural setting. And that's the basis of hiring, not listing out jobs that are just lists of tools. That's me. That's the point I wanted to make. Hope everyone enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much, Aiden. Really appreciate that. I'm just going to read through a few questions. Generally, I'm getting a lot of positive comments in the chat. I don't know if you can see it at the moment. First question that came in from Kenny was, when and where do we revolt?
Anytime you want.
And then I'm just following up all of these. Lots of messages saying really good presentation, good content. Colin asked, how would you technically test for the basics, or would you not?
I think a short conversation. I've been screening lots of candidates for other roles to test out this question. So I've been doing technical pre-screening and things like that to try and work out how you differentiate somebody who technically meets the baseline requirements versus not. And it's nothing to do with the tools. From talking to them. An engineer knows when another engineer is talking. It's sort of a basic, it's not a good enough framework. And this is half of the point of this talk, is that our gut intuition is riding on it. If I talk to an engineer and I ask them questions and ask them to speak about things, we're pretty good as humans at telling parts of our own crew apart from one another. Again, I don't think that's good enough. We shouldn't rely on it, but that's what I use at the moment. Hopefully someday there's something a bit better. Perfect.
I'm sorry if I've missed anyone here. Powell says, could you come to some hiring managers meetings and deliver this presentation? And should we scrap tech tests?
Should we scrap tech tests? No, but I think there's probably a narrow range of situations in which they're appropriate. This is part of this. Tech tests are trying to cover the arse of hiring managers to make sure they don't make a mistake. We need to make it more acceptable to join a team and, you know, people go their own way. You know, like relationships, you can't test your way into a good relationship. You have to try it. You have to see what works, and you have to not stigmatize people going their separate ways. You know, the term getting fired, you know, is a really horrible term. Sometimes it's just, yeah, this isn't working out how we'd all like, and it's not increasing our sort of happiness and productivity, and that's okay. We need to destigmatize it. So tech tests, probably not. Getting people on board with, you know, free to leave and decide it's not for them, I think is the better approach.
No worries. Karim, I apologize if I've mispronounced your name there, asked, what is the cost associated with not hiring a right person for the job?
It depends on the team culture. If you hire the wrong, there isn't a wrong person. There's just an incompatibility. I think using right and wrong and absolutes like that is definitely a bad thing. Hiring somebody that's not compatible with the team usually means that the team has a very narrow definition of what's compatible. Yeah, I think bad hires usually boil down to cultural failings in the team and the company rather than the candidate that we deem as a bad hire. And, you know, it's just the wrong language, it's the wrong attitude, it's the wrong everything. It's just wrong from the ground up as far as I'm concerned. So the costs are high needlessly.
No worries. Zach has asked a question. I'm going to unmute you just to add 2 cents to this, Zach. How do you envisage what you're saying being implemented into a company's hiring processes? He said many devs or managers that he's known who need to hire find it more of a chore than something to get stuck into.
I think we have to start with the language that we use around hiring. You know, there's no point in, as an industry, you know, there's a lot of money flowing around in IT. There's a lot of job security for people. There's a lot of, you know, freedom to express yourself. It's not like Victorian Mills where if I don't earn money, I'm not going to be able to feed my kids. So I'm just going to conform to this uniform view of, you know, we're still using a language, getting fired, and, you know, we're still using a framework that you could easily apply back then. It's not the appropriate framework. The way I see it working is as accepting that teams are human relationships. It's okay to speak about them in emotional terms. It's okay to say, what do we want from the person joining our team, not just what skills do we want them to know. But to do so in a way that's inclusive and promotes diversity as well. I don't want a team that's just like me, and I don't want a team that doesn't show sympathy and empathy and patience with people that are different to that. So I think it comes first and foremost from deciding what's our personal values in the team and are they correct? And I think generally industry's got a long way to go to doing that. So, yeah.
No worries, Zach. I didn't know if you had anything to add to that following the question.
No, he answered it very well, to be honest with you. Yes.
No worries. Megan asked, how do you feel that company culture will change with remote working?
I think hopefully it I don't know. I'm not the person to talk about this because I'm not a big fan of remote working. So my own prejudice sort of comes into this. I hope it makes it easier for everybody to get a fair crack at a job. I know too many people that, you know, have not had the opportunities they should because they're not very well liked in the interview process. I gave a talk to a bunch of boot camp graduates, and one of the main points, really sadly, that I said to them was learn how to be liked in an interview. That's the primary skill you're going to need. Learn how to be liked in an interview, and that was so depressing to say to people. You know, I hope it widens the range of people that get ahead ultimately.
No worries. Aiden has asked, coming from the other side, should you avoid applying for jobs that do simply just list their tech stack?
I mean, I'm usually a contractor and consultant, so I just apply to whatever I think I can do, I suppose. I'd say be wary of companies that just list tools out as their jobs, because they might, it probably, if you've got the luxury of choice, not everybody does, and it's a very luxurious thing to be able to say, I'm not going to apply for this job even though I know those tools because I don't like the job spec. But if you're in that situation, you can probably tell a lot about a company's culture from their job spec. There's some really cracking ones. There's some companies I would love to work for just because when I read their job specs, it's right. It expresses their culture, who they are, not the narrow type of person they're looking for. So I'd be wary, I suppose.
No worries. Brian, I'm just going to unmute you to read this one out as a comment if you would like to add anything. He says he's been known, he knows some people have been hired because of a good interview, lots of personality, but unfortunately no real job skills, and that it's all about striking the balance. It's more of a statement than a question. I don't know if you had anything to add to that,
Aiden. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any qualifications. I winged it into the industry on the gift of the gab, if you like, and being able to talk my way around an interview. It was a great thing for me. It got me from no experience to a decent amount of experience, but it's a sad situation that's the case. So yeah, I agree. It does need more balance, but I don't think we've even got the language a lot of the times in industry to talk about it in a healthy way.
No worries. Barnaby asked, how do you approach this from the perspective of someone looking for a role? Are there ways that they can change, help to change this?
Demand, no. I think a lot of it comes down to the recruitment industry and hiring managers. I think especially technical hiring managers, we've got a lot of anxiety when we're asked to hire because nobody's told me how to hire, the best way to hire and things like that. I think hiring managers, technical hiring managers need more training. I think the recruitment industry needs more adjustment in the way that they search for candidates and put them forward. There's a lot to do, and I don't think it starts with the person looking for a job.
No worries. A quick comment from Steve. We hired someone who was a very similar personality to the owner, but the management of someone so similar to the owner allowed the individual to drift and never deliver.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think you have to make a selection. You have to be aware of the psychology of the teams that you build in and the personality types. As a manager, most of my job is looks more like a counselor than it does a software developer. But nobody ever told me that would be the case. You know, there's a lot of technical people going into engineering management roles, lead roles, where no one's ever taught you about emotional literacy. So how can you judge the emotional fit of other people in a situation? It's just nonsense. Yeah, that's it. It's nonsense. It is a rant. The whole thing is a rant.
No worries. Ian's asked, once they're hired, what do you believe is the key to keeping a new hire? Basically, what can you do to retain good staff?
Just, I think, honesty and acceptance and a lot of promotion of a really good team culture that's non-judgmental, that's got a high degree of emotional literacy goes a long way. And I think also just, I don't know, the person I am at work is exactly the same person I am at home, because I don't think there should be any difference, and I don't think you should expect there to be any difference in people on your own team either. It's a complicated question, and I don't think it's one that's easily answerable, and I don't think it's easily answerable by me as a software developer either.
No, of course. He's followed that up. I apologize. I missed the follow-up comment there. It says personally he finds it a chore because he's just trying to check off a list of requirements that he has to justify the hire with to management. He doesn't mind interviewing or looking at CVs, depending on the length of the CV, obviously. But having to find out how much Jira someone has used has always derailed a good conversation on tech.
Yeah.
There's a few wind-up comments there. Chris says it was a great rant. Colin asked, locally, do you know anyone who's hiring well? Personally, he's always admired the BBC because their initiatives around diversity.
The BBC. I don't know. I think it depends whether they follow through. In IT, there's always a lot of narrative and people going, "Oh yes, you know, we really bend over backwards to blah blah blah," and usually people that get the jobs go, "Actually, that was nonsense." You know, they say one thing, but it's not really a reflection of their culture. That being said, Made Tech, they're a Manchester company. Every job ad I've read of theirs has been really good. I applied for something and they turned me down, but there you go. But they're still very good. I think they've got really good examples of how to write really good job specs and how to really well communicate company culture. So one of the things they do is their employee handbook is on GitHub for anybody to look through, which is nice. It gives you a sense of who they are and what they're doing on a personal and the technical level. So yeah, check them out.
Perfect. Well, I am going to wrap up the questionnaire there because I don't want us to run too far over on time and not get the quality out for the next presentations. I'm going to hand over now. First of all, thank you very much, Aiden.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you back. I'm going to hand over to Martin Mayer now for the second talk of the evening. For those of you who don't know Martin, Martin's done a few talks for me at meetups before, and he is where's he gone? Unmute, Martin. Where's he gone? It worked.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay now. Perfect. Yeah, so Martin is software development manager over at Sorted. I can see that we've got a few people in tonight. Matty asked, where is the raffle? With this being a launch event, Matty, I haven't got a sponsor for the evening, but I'm aware that we've got something to raffle off after the last presentation. I promise next month the raffles will be back. But yes, I'll hand over to you now, Martin. Are you okay to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll give that a try now. Should be able to share that. One sec. I think you should be able to see full screen there. Is that coming through okay?
Yep, that's perfect, Matt. I will mute myself now and leave it to you from there.
Thanks very much. Evening, everybody. Very, very privileged to be at the first one of these and presenting. Great talk there from Aiden. Thank you very much. Hard one to follow. So I hope I can do this justice and give you something interesting to think about tonight. So this talk's on characterization testing, which has come from some of the recent experience I've had using this again. I've used it a few times. We had some very good TDD sessions training us up on this a few years ago, but now getting able to use this again in earnest on some of the most recent work I've been doing. And it's really helped us speed along. So I wanted to just try and introduce this to people who may not have come across it. So characterization testing, mitigating risk of changes around legacy code. Just give me a second. I'll swap over to my slides so I can go through. Okay, so this is just to be clear on how I'm going to present this tonight. This is my approach, not the approach. So asking people to contribute, to add value to this session. So please ask questions. I'm sure there'll be lots of things you can ask on this. Give honest feedback. But most importantly, and what I'm really interested in, is for you to share your own experiences and conclusions on both legacy code, working with legacy code, and also working with characterization tests and similar testing approaches if you've used those yourself. So it's really good to try and hear more views on that because it'll help me and help my teams to build on what they know. Okay, you can follow along with slide deck and references if you just go to this QR code link or go to this bit.ly link here. That's just a GitHub repo that you can go to if you want to follow along. It's just got these slides. It's got some markdown files, terms testing that I'm putting into this as well. So don't want to dwell on some of the old ground. Some of you might really know your stuff when it comes to testing, and I don't want to really power on and do a testing training thing as well here. So I've put those references in for you all to follow along with. So if you're a bit new to testing concepts, you can follow along, and some of the terms might make a bit more sense. I've tried to do this as a conceptual thing tonight, so hopefully it's easy for most people to follow along. If you do have questions, though, please ask. If you don't want to ask those in front of everybody else, please do contact me on LinkedIn. I'm going to share my link on that as well afterwards, and you feel free to ask any questions, ask for any help running this sort of thing with your teams. Okay, I'll just dwell on that link for just a couple more seconds, just give people a chance to scan it if they want to. Okay, I'll move on to the next one now. So this, as we were saying, it's about legacy code, it's about testing, and it's about change. If we leave legacy code where it is, great, we don't have to worry. Legacy code will sit there, it'll be valuable code, and it won't cause us any problems. But invariably, we have to change for various reasons, and that causes us problems with legacy code. We're going to talk a little bit about the problem, talk about what legacy code is, and then I'm going to talk about the reasons why you might change legacy code for refactoring purposes. Again, we'll define what that is, or for other purposes that we'll need to change the code, and where the risk is applied and what we can do to mitigate that risk and feel a little bit safer in what we're doing. So to define the problem, forgive me for all of the superhero references I've plowed into this, anything to make a dry subject more interesting. So you'll see lots of superheroes, all sorts of things, and just some generally bad clip art that I've found from around the internet. Problem is, we're afraid we'll break something if we change legacy code to refactor it. So a very quick definition of refactoring. Sorry, just before we move into that, need the notes on that. So refactoring is improving the internal structure of an existing code base while preserving its external behavior. So from the outside, we're not making any changes to the code. What we're doing is we're changing the internal structure to improve it for various reasons. We'll talk about some of those. But there'll be no visible change from the outside. What we're worried about when we change it is breaking something. So we've got code in place that we're worried we're going to make a breaking change to. And that makes us feel unsafe. It slows us down. There's loads of things around it. It just makes us not want to work on it at all. And when we're asked, how long will this take? We come up with a really high estimate because we're feeling at risk of what we're going to do. So what is legacy code? So I looked around on the internet for some of the definitions and some of the ways people have tried to define it. Their suggestions is old code. Not going to get into that debate. It's not always old code, in my view. It's code that we're feeling unsafe to change, but that's what some people's interpretation of it is. So they might think it's old code, something on an old tech stack, something they don't want to touch because it's outside their comfort zone. Not necessarily, but we'll come back. Likewise, code written before current tests. Before current standards. So the standards that we're working to, maybe it's code from before we changed our standards and formed those between ourselves. Bad code that is difficult to test. Bad code, maybe, but we are talking about valuable code. So is it really that bad if it's valuable? More than anything, is it bad test? Is it unreadable code? And what is it that makes it bad? Difficult to change code that we don't understand. I think we're coming towards the right sort of definition for this. Then gone into to look at some of the books that are available on this subject, just to try and really sort of boil this down to what it is. So simply code without tests. And that's the definition from Michael Feathers in his book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code. He's also the person who's pioneered the idea of characterization testing. So what he talks about is simply code without tests. And he adds to that and says, code without tests is bad code. Doesn't matter how well written it is. It doesn't matter how pretty or object-oriented or well encapsulated it is. With tests, we can change the behavior of our code quickly and verifiably. Without them, we really don't know if our code is getting better or worse. And I think that's the key here. We don't know if we're making a genuine improvement with the change we want to make, along with the potential there to really break it in some other area and make it worse and regress the code we've got. There's another definition of this that I think is also useful. Profitable code that we feel afraid to change. I think that feeling is important. We talked before about safety, about risk. That's key here. And that's from a guy called JB Rainsberger. He's a blogger. He's written a very good document there, Surviving Legacy Code with Golden Master and Sampling. So Golden Master is another name for characterization tests that you might come across. So you might come across that concept. It's the same concept. And he says, I treat valuable code with considerable respect. It provides food for families. I treat difficult to change code also with considerable respect. So the two things there in a lot of the legacy code we've got, we're using it because it's valuable, but it's difficult to change. Although this comes more from fear than admiration, if we put these two things together, then quite simply, one false move and I might destroy an order of magnitude more profit than the yearly cost to keep me around. So that's where it feels scary. You might do a lot of damage above what even your salary is. You can make thousands of pounds worth of damage in one fell swoop. And that's where it feels like pressure. That's going to make us feel unsafe and slow down and make us want to do more tests. I've come up with a third definition just based on those and some other insights from it. So I'd say it's profitable, valuable code without adequate tests in place, meaning it's considerable risk to the organization. So what we're doing here is we've got profitable, valuable code, something that's giving us value. We've not got adequate tests in place, and therefore it's a massive risk to making any change. Apologies for this one. It's going to be a really bright screen after all those dark ones. There we go. Sorted pink. I can see people glowing on the camera now. If it's so risky, then why change legacy code to refactor it? That's a really good question. If it's in place and it's working, why refactor it? Well, why change any code base? Why change valuable working code, customer requirements, bug fixes, compliance, security concerns, all these reasons. They're the usual reasons that we can't change ourselves. The dev teams get these requests coming through. And before we make those changes, we want to make them in a safe way, and we want to make the code better to work with. So that's one of the reasons for doing the refactoring before we get started. So that brings us back to why refactor. Prepare for a value-adding change. Code may be reusable, so we can use it somewhere else as well. So maybe another change where we could use that code, but it's too tightly coupled. Tight couplings where things are tightly linked together, so it's very hard to separate out key functionality from each other and use them again. We want to write code that is easier to read and debug. We spend many more hours reading code than we do writing it. When we go back to revisit it for debugging purposes, when we're checking through and auditing code, when we're looking at how it works. So because of that, we want something to be human readable. It's relatively straightforward to write code that's machine executable, but being human readable is quite a skill. And very rarely, like all writing, we get it right first time. There's a well-known phrase, there's no such thing as great writing, just great rewriting. I think that comes to mind here. And we want to make code changes safer and faster. So when we're putting this together, if we've got that ability to make it safer and faster, that's taking pressure off the teams and enables them to work at speed as well. So double bonus. And then it's easier to estimate effort as well. We have a lot of problems when in different code bases at different places I've worked, where we've got areas of technical or architectural debt, where you're looking at these items and thinking, hang on, this isn't a normal piece of code. I'm going to have to go in and dig into this to give an estimate. Invariably, when you're trying to plan work, it's much harder to even plan whether it might take a week, a month, a year, if you've got to go in and dig in first. If you have well-structured code that's easy to read, and you can continually go through that and improve it and own that code base, that's going to really help you to estimate and have stable responses there. And then finally, the reduced time to skill up. If you've got a new dev coming on board your team and you've got all this legacy code to maintain, it's going to take them much longer to skill up. So having code that is in coding standards and is clean code and is easy to read, it's much easier for them to get started in there. So potential solution is characterization testing. So what is characterization testing? It's a form of exploratory testing. It produces mostly automated tests. So we're exploring the code base. So exploratory testing, just a very basic definition, is where we're going away from what we know of the requirements. And here with this code, we may know very little of those requirements. So this is a form of exploratory testing where we're testing the unknown. And what we're trying to do is trying to capture that with this and producing mostly automated tests, because there are some manual options here when we want to test these. It informs our regression cases. So where we've got gaps in regression packs, we can inform that with what we find out from characterization testing. It forms a benchmark. We're going to record the output of our results. We're going to record the inputs that we're putting in, and we're going to be able to play those before and after a code change, so we can check for differences. And it aims to capture and preserve all the value. So what we're trying to do is capture the essence of what that code is doing, and then be able to play that back and make sure we haven't made any breaking changes when we fix any bugs or make changes for compliance, etc. Reasons for characterization tests. The code isn't well covered by tests, so you might have missing code coverage. Requirements are unclear. This might be a piece of code that was rushed through and we're not quite sure how it works or what it's trying to achieve, but it might be badly named. It could be any number of reasons. Or with just the people who put the code together have long since left the business or even forgotten about it, even if they're with us still. Code isn't clean and readable. So again, we were talking about that, improving the code and going back to make things better. We can all improve our code if we go back to it. I was looking at some of my code from about 6 months ago and I was horrified. It's very easy to write bad code, especially when you're under pressure to deliver, and we can always go back and check we can improve it. And then finally, adding coverage would add safety. So I think that safety is really important. We don't want to be stressed at work, and that helps us to perform as well. Okay, so how would you get started? So this is, again, my approach. This is the way I've done things before. You need to find your own way with it, but I'd start by using the simplest unit of code in the piece you're going to refactor or want to rework. So try to start small, especially when you're experimenting with this, because you don't want to be learning a framework and also tackling a real beast of a piece of code. So start with something small, possibly even something you wouldn't normally use characterization testing with, and try and learn that. Learn the way it works, even maybe test with a piece of familiar code and see if this approach can give you the same results. Make sure it matches up with your expectations. Assess if more logging should be added. So we don't just want to look at the outputs of the test. We also want to look at the steps along the way. For example, if this code was to generate a label, we might also want to see how it's persisting key parts of the database. We might want to see how it's calling different components along the way and log that piece. It depends at what scope we're testing this as well, whether this is an integration level or at a higher level as an end-to-end test. Again, we'll talk a bit more on that later on in the slides. Consider the structure of our test. So how are you going to put this test together? What's it going to look like? What key dependencies are you going to need? What scope are you going to test at? Are you going to go at a unit level? Or are you going to look more of an integration? I think these are more common at integration or system level tests, potentially end-to-end tests as well. Record all of the valued output to file. So what you're trying to do is capture all of this, usually as a text file. So you can give yourself a text diff at the end of it. So you can look between before and after. You might not understand how all the code works, but you've got a record, that benchmark of what it does with a broad range of inputs. And then create the test case source. That's our inputs. The ideal is to get this data driven if you can, but you might put some boilerplate code in there to pull different events in. The ideal though is something like a CSV file or something with the key inputs in that you can add to easily. And that's quite quick for adding the extra test cases in. You'll probably find that as you go with this, you'll keep adding additional cases. So assuming you're going with standard patterns, arrange to set up the test prerequisites, act, call the subject under test, and then assert. So this is a bit different than a normal unit test that you might set up or a end-to-end test that you might set up. We're going to do setup to compare the diffs. You can either do that with an assert, but it'll be simple is equal to what you've captured in your file as the before against what you're picking up now in the new file from your current version of code. So the norm is you'd probably run this test, capture the file that you consider the working version of code, the output from the working version of code, commit that into your repo, and that's what you're going to compare to. You're going to read that file in when you've got the new output for your changed code, and then compare the two pieces of text. So what you'd really be wanting is that when you've done your change, these key areas around it don't have any difference at all. So when you've refactored everything, like we said, we're not expecting any change from the outside. So we expect those two pieces of text to be identical. You can either do that with just a simple assert, or you can go through and use a text diff tool as well. If you're running through this very fast, that might be what you do first, using that text diff tool to look for differences. And you can see when you've gone wrong there. The benefit of doing it in an automated approach is every time you change code, you can have the test run again, depending on how many cycles you need to run of that and how long that takes. So we're focused on the diff between, the output of the test runs before and after. Okay, let's go through some pros and cons of using this. So the pros, we can test code we don't understand. That's great because we can move on and have safety in making changes to something we don't really understand that well. I think the first thing is admitting when we're in that situation. And then we've broadly got to add safety by adding enough test cases to get through this. So there's still risk here, but at least we can mitigate that by putting as broad a range of tests in place with the automation. Set up a benchmark before changes, so we can capture that and put it into our repository, and we can keep that either temporarily or for longer if it becomes part of our regression pack in some way. Enables testing at relative speed. So as you can imagine, doing all this manually, all the tests you'd have to set up, driving that through, then every time you find something breaking, repeat that loop again, do it as manual tests. It can be very intensive. Also, if you're having to shape regression packs with automated testing, again, that's very intensive because you're writing individual cases. It also takes a long time to run them. So an easy general approach to learn and teach others. So this approach is quite simple to start with, and just getting a workshop run with your team, you can try this out quite quickly. It supports open box and closed box testing. So it's quite good because you can scope it at any level. Obviously, the more closed box your testing is, the more cases you have to run to have confidence in it. If you're open box and you can do some debugging with it, and we'll talk about those additional tasks that you can do to make this faster, then it's obviously a lot quicker to do, and we can scope it to the area we're working in. It's also fun to work with. You're learning about something that was previously veiled, and you're learning about a new code base. You're learning new techniques as you go through this. It's very collaborative. You can do this as a mob programming session. It's really fun to do. So the cons, and it's not all good. It takes time and hard work. This isn't something you can set up instantly. It's not a silver bullet. It can easily mean a lot of test cases and slow cycles. So depending on what level you're running at, this might take a long time to run. If you're down at the integration test level, it might be fairly quick. But if you've got any dependencies that you can't mock out easily, this can be quite slow. Depending on framework, you might have a lot of boilerplate code. The tests can be brittle as they depend on detail. So you might find that you're breaking the test as you work a lot. As you move things on, it can very quickly break, and then you've got to move the tests on as well. That's not always a great feeling when you've got to move on the test as well as the code. There's some very nasty names for that rather than refactoring. As you can imagine, some of those syllables change. I won't say them on camera now. Alternatives and supplementary tasks. So these are the things that we can run as an alternative to characterization testing. You probably use these already. And you can also use them to speed up characterization testing where you've come up with blockers. So code and requirements analysis, and also filling in missing tests as well is probably a good title for what I've put down here. So understand the requirements and cover all code with appropriate unit, integration, and end-to-end tests. So if we're digging into the code and we're putting those requirements in as we understand them, that can help us speed up as well. We don't need as many test cases for the end-to-end. Feature flags, that's quite a useful one. So this is where we set up a new version of the code starting with a direct copy and make modifications there. We can then preserve the original version in source using a feature flag stored somewhere in remote config and switch to between versions. So this is where we've got two versions of the code. We keep the one we've got safeguarded there as an old version, and then we have a flag, just a Boolean true false somewhere remotely. We check that each time, and if we've got it set to true, we use the new version of code. False, it uses the old one. This is quite a safe way to release. It's quite useful as well when you've not got something where you've got continuous deployment, you can't push out quickly. It's quite handy to be able to have this, and it works in quite nicely with characterization testing. Feature branches. So just branching, it's just your branching strategy and test strategy. If you've got an environment where you need to do these end-to-end tests and you've got the ability to push a branch up there, then working with that really helps you to speed up through these changes and compare the two as an A/B test. And then, of course, manual exploratory testing. Slow, but can be used to research the code behavior before writing characterization tests. It's also a good alternative for components that are hard to test with automation. And then, of course, the nasty one we've all had to do at some point as devs. I'm sure a lot of devs can appreciate this one. Debug existing code just to find out how it works. And this can be real painstaking stuff, going through line by line to work out how old code works. Debug to reverse engineer how the code is currently behaving. Observability. So this is where we're adding this additional logging in. So we can do this at the console level, so we're getting that output from tests. We can also do this for the observability for our service delivery team, our live team, customer support team, to be able to see the monitoring of our app. To improve observability will help give us confidence in what we're doing here. So it can be used in test or it can be used in live. Develop additional logging to trace behavior. You might be able to have that switched on or off if you don't want to spam your logs. And then monitor errors. So all these things are giving us confidence in this older code. And then automated regression tests. So adding to that regression pack that we were saying before, be able to pull in extra tests at any part of the scope. So unit tests, integration tests, system tests, or end-to-end tests. Again, those are in the glossary of terms if you're not familiar with those. But they're just at different levels of testing. So add to existing regression tests and introduce tests for newly refactored components as they are broken out. So as we're improving our code, we expect there to be more components coming out, and then we can unit test those distinct components that come out of that refactoring. So implementation options. Implement your own simple test framework. So write a test framework from scratch. It's not that hard for what this does really. Record outputs to a file and play inputs from a file. So using something maybe like a framework like NUnit or XUnit, or whatever you've got in your language. So I'm used to C#, so apologies for it being a C# example. But whatever you've got as a test framework, build on that, a generic one, and then add to it to do the input and output recording. record outputs to file and play inputs from files. So you want to be able to read from an input file with all your parameters, and you want to be able to record your outputs, which you can then save them the main file that's before the changes and put that into your repository, and then read that back and compare it to your outputs when you're asserting on your test. Capture log string data to save as part of the output file. So all that logging along with the outputs, get that all together and store that in the file as you go. And then compare the run to a pre-recorded output login working state. So say working as in, that's what we've got on live. We're presuming that is exactly as it should run. But that's the assumption we're making here. We're looking to not break things. We're not looking for it to be perfect before. We don't know that yet. And you can do that manually or with an assertion. The other option is approval tests, which is a library out there that's built for this. I've not had a look at this much yet. It does look a little bit more boilerplate. So it doesn't look like you can drive it as easily from CSV, but I might be wrong. I'm going to do a bit with that, and I might do a workshop on that if people are interested, either with the SocialCode, if Ross and the other organisers will have us for that, or outside of that. So just got a thumbs up there, so that sounds good. So maybe keep an eye on things. We might do a workshop soon. Approval test library supports multiple languages, so you're not stuck with C# and to do this. There's lots of languages supported there. JavaScript, Python, Go. I think there's a version for C#. Lots of languages there. Have a look at it. I've put the links in the references on that repo as well. Standardizes syntax, but the test code is quite brittle. Contains a lot of boilerplate. Those are just the examples I've seen. Like I say, it may well handle CSV data and things. So it's the input data, I think, that's the big part of setup. If you have to do those as all code to put those in. Even so, it can still speed you up compared with other implementations. I haven't spent a lot of time with this yet, as we said. We'll do that workshop later, and maybe we can crack that together. So how can you try this? Follow the references listed in the slide deck. Organize a session with your peers at work or in a community like this. If you've got a piece of work that you can do this with, mob on it and have a look. Probably one that you've not got time pressures on, but really good to try and crack this together. And I think it'll give you a lot of safety, even if you choose to use other methods afterwards. It'll inform you of how the code works. Follow the tutorials with frameworks such as approvals tests. There's the link to the slide deck again. There's a link if you prefer to use that. So if you want to get those slides, have a look at those. They're in PDF form, everything you've seen here tonight. There's also the links for the glossary of terms and the references, which give you a few links, including the book links that are referenced throughout here. Just leave that on for just a second longer. Just a quick thank you, really, to everybody involved, and thanks. Really feel really privileged to be on the first one here. So it's a really good community you're building up here, Ross, and all the guys who've organised this tonight. Really pleased, and hope you go on to do bigger and better things with this. It's great. I'll move on to the next. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to have a chat with me. If you want help setting up one of these workshops, so you just got some questions or feedback, if you want to tell me I've talked nonsense for 20 minutes, that's fine as well. More than happy to hear that. And if you want a hand with your own, we've talked about it being a community. If you want a hand setting up your own meetup, if you want a hand with the slides or with some technical review, anything like that, even if I can't help personally, I can probably find somebody who can. So feel free to message me, and I'll help in any way I can. So just once again, thank you, and really enjoyed tonight. And,
thank you very much, Martin.
Any questions?
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We've already had a few questions come through. I'm just trying to scroll back up because there was a lot of stuff going through. I'm just going to start with Dave. Where's it gone? Sorry, Zoom chat is not fantastic for scrolling. Where's it gone? Dave. I apologize to Dave for that. I physically can't get your question to load up. I had a lot of people saying, thank you and great talk and things like that. I apologize to anyone who, in fact, I finally managed to get one to load. Aiden has asked if you abandon. Yeah, I apologize. This does not scroll very well whatsoever. If you abandon how or why code works, you just test that it doesn't change or break. Those differences contain lots of drive-by state. How do you avoid the situation whereby small changes break thousands of tests because tests contain so much state?
Really, really good question. It's very difficult. This, like I said, it's not a silver bullet. This is additional tool to your arsenal. It's not, you don't abandon all of your other approaches to testing. That's the first thing I'd say is don't think this is going to solve all your problems. It's another tool. Aiden talked a lot about tools through his talk. I think that's the key. This is something else you can use that helps you. It's another approach. But yeah, you don't throw everything you've got out the window, and you've clearly got to worry about safety still. It doesn't mean that you're invulnerable to problems. For example, if you don't cover anything on the test as well, apart from the fact that you could be invalidating the tests you've got, and if you are invalidating the test by refactoring as well, that's probably effort looking at whether those tests were valid in the first place, and whether they were too brittle in the way they went in some places. In other places, refactoring you're gonna have to abandon some tests, and that is costly. That's kind of why people don't tend to refactor legacy code much. But there is a cost there. You've got to look at the tests you've got in place and see if you are changing the way that's structured, whether it's worth it. It's not always right to refactor because you might be throwing away so much. Sometimes it gets to a point where you're almost thinking you should rewrite components. And I think you've got to balance all that together. But this gives you another set of inputs really into what you're doing with testing. Does that answer your question, Aiden?
Thumbs up there. Sounds good. If anyone's got any other questions, please do pop them in the chat now. Otherwise, I will hand over to our last speaker of the evening. I'll just give it a few seconds, see if anyone's got any queries that they're interested in. We've had a lot of people saying thank you for the talk, man. I'll let you have a read through all the nice comments once you've stopped sharing your screen there, and can appreciate that. Anyone got any more questions for Martin? Just going through. Obviously covered a lot, and you were really clear on all of it, so it's great to see that people really understood it. I don't know, is that your screen, Martin, with a zoom button popped up?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just trying to find out how to get to unshare my screen, so I can handle the rest of this, but I'm not very good at.
If you look at the top, it should have a green button there, a green panel at the very top.
Yeah, I think I've changed the mode of my view. I've never got it into this before, so I'll do my best to get out of here.
I see if I can. I'm not sure I can actually stop you from sharing your screen, to be fair. So,
right, all the controls have disappeared for me. 1 second. Right, I'm gonna.
I can stop you from sharing. Hang on 1 sec. I've got the option.
I was going to say, if you've got a way of taking control back, feel free.
There you go. There we go.
Thank you very much.
Right, I'm now going to hand on to our last speaker of the evening, Rachel. I'll just unmute you there. Rachel, are you okay to share your screen now?
I'm not using a screen tonight.
You're not using a screen tonight? No worries. Then if you've got the option to, I would recommend switching to gallery review, as Rachel will be the one talking, and it'll go larger from there. What I say, would you like everyone to have the option to unmute, or would you like everyone to be unmuted? Sorry, Rachel.
If people can stay muted and then ask questions at the end, that would be perfect.
No problem. That's perfect. Well, I will allow you to. Go on from there.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone. Would you like to play a game? We're going to play a memory game. I'm going to show you some objects, and I want you to try and remember them, and we will come back to them a little bit later on in today's presentation. And if you can't see them, I'm going to describe them, so you can still play along if you'd like to. So I'm just changing the view there. So first of all, we've got a yellow Lego brick 2x6. We've got a blue crayon. We've got a toy red London bus. So I hope you can all try and remember those. And and we're going to come back to those a little bit later on. So what is neurodiversity and why should you care about it? That's what I'm going to be talking about today. But who am I? Who am I to be telling you what neurodiversity is? Well, I'm co-founder of Inclusively Tech with Amy Newton. We are a neurodiversity consultancy. So what we do is go into companies and help them recruit and retain and manage neurodiverse staff. We help them understand neurodiverse people so they can be inclusive and accessible. I'm also the co-founder of the Neurodiversity Association, which is, excuse me, a professional group. And what are my qualifications? Well, I'm autistic and I've got ADHD, so I'm going to be talking today from a first person perspective. So the first part of my talk, what is neurodiversity? I would like to show you a recipe for Victoria sponge. There you go. It's not very well written, is it? The words are all over the place. It's not very easy to read. But as I pull this back, you might be able to see something else. You see that? There's a shape of a fish hidden in the text. And that's how dyslexic people see. Dyslexia is characterized by seeing in shapes rather than detail. And that's why dyslexics have trouble with words. Dyslexics have challenges with reading, with writing, and with spelling. And actually, an interesting article was published in Neurodiversity Media quite recently, and it said that the biggest problem dyslexic people have is actually with poor organisation, poor working memory, organisation, and time management. But of course, having issues with spelling and writing and reading is a really big deal because we live in a world of words. We can't escape from words. All of us, we have to read and write all the time. But dyslexics are also very talented because they see in shapes. They're really, really good at spatial stuff. So you find a lot of dyslexic people in jobs like graphic design, art, architecture, anything that involves seeing in 3 dimensions or seeing shapes and colours and patterns and things like that. And also it makes them good at spotting patterns. So any job where you have to spot patterns or link things together or spot anomalies are really, really good for dyslexics. In fact, if you give a dyslexic person 2 problems, they'll solve both of them at once using the same method. It's quite extraordinary to watch. And that's one reason that a lot of dyslexics are very, very successful and a lot are entrepreneurs because of this amazing problem-solving ability that so many of them have. There are, in the UK, 25% of CEOs are dyslexic and 40% of British millionaires are also dyslexic. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking maybe you'd like one of those dyslexics to be your next partner if they're so loaded. But if you're thinking that, then I've got a word of warning for you. They won't text you back. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first is that it takes them quite a long time. We don't always realise quite how long a dyslexic person might be putting together a text or an email because it's harder for them than it is for other people. And the other reason I found is that dyslexic people are quite often ashamed or embarrassed by the fact that their spelling and grammar is not so good, or they might use the wrong word or miss a word out. So sometimes they will avoid texting you back because they're afraid that you're going to be judging them. Do you want to get back to that game, the memory game? See what you remembered. So we had the yellow Lego brick 2x4. We had the blue crayon. We had the lemon. And we had the toy London bus. Oh, I can see some shaking heads there. It's a lemon, isn't it? You didn't see the lemon. Somebody thinking, did she show a lemon? Was I not listening? There was no lemon. This wasn't really a memory game. It was a simulation of what it's like to have ADHD. And it's based on a real experience that I had on a course. I signed up for a listening course, even though I have ADHD, which is an example of how people like me don't always think things through. It wasn't going to go well, was it, a listening course? So on this course, the trainer showed some videos and then asked some questions about them. And so we watched them all, and as usual, I wasn't really paying attention. And then he asked questions about the first one, and everyone else in the room was answering them, and I don't, because I'm going to get it wrong, or you know, I missed a bit. And then he said, and what about the second video? And everyone else was answering the questions, and I was staring at the wall. And then he said, and what about the third video? And I was like, hang on, there are only 2 videos. What's he talking about? Is he playing a trick on us? He's playing a trick on us. But then everyone else in the room was going, oh yeah, this happened and that happened. And I was sitting there thinking, what have they seen that I haven't? And I was thinking about it, and I realized that there were 3 videos, and I'd forgotten about the middle one. I'd just seen it, and not only had I forgotten what happened in that video, I'd actually forgotten it existed. And that's how extreme ADHD is. It's not just forgetting things, it's actually forgetting what you've forgotten. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And there are 2 kinds. There's hyperactive, which is probably the one that you're most familiar with, and there's inattentive, which is the kind I have, where you sort of drift off and daydream and things. So we are easily distracted. We can't normally focus for very long. We tend to be messy. We tend to be disorganized. But we've got some great strengths as well. We're really good at multitasking. You'll find people with ADHD in jobs where multitasking is an asset. You know, like somebody carrying out surgery, for example, where you've got a lot to do at once, or something in performance or events where everything's going on all at once. People with ADHD are really good at that. And we're good under pressure as well. In fact, we're so good under pressure that if that pressure doesn't exist, we'll create it for ourselves. That's why you find us leaving things till the last minute, because we want that thrill of just getting it in time for the deadline. What a lot of people don't realize about ADHD is that we can hyperfocus. So the state of being sort of chaotic and distracted is not constant. If we're really into something, if we're really enthusiastic about something, we can get a state of flow, and we can hyperfocus, and we can do that for quite a long time. You might be wondering how somebody with ADHD can do this, because I haven't got any slides to remember what I'm going to say, and I haven't got notes either. And the reason is because I'm so late diagnosed. I'm 46 now, and I didn't realize I had ADHD until fairly recently. So I've got tons and tons and tons of strategies to help me remember stuff, to help me do my job and be able to do that, you know, to focus and to hopefully not get distracted, because I know I'm going to be distracted at some point. I know that Dave is going to walk past my French windows at some point while I'm talking, and he is going to stare in at me. You might be wondering who Dave is and why I'm okay with him walking around my back garden and staring at me through the window. Dave is the neighbour's cat. My neighbour is a witch, a real one. She's got loads of cats, and most of them have like proper witchy names like Merlin and Hecate. And then there's Dave, good old Dave. So if you've brought pen and paper, I'd like you to do a bit of drawing now. If you haven't got pen and paper, that's okay. You can just watch along. What I want you to draw is a bat and ball. I'm not going to ask you to show me this, by the way, so it doesn't have to be any good. Just a quick sketch of a bat and ball. So, what most of you have drawn, or might still be drawing, is probably something like this. This is a table tennis bat with a ping pong ball. You might have drawn a cricket bat or a baseball bat, but some kind of bat and ball. If you've drawn that, you've done it wrong, because that's not what I said. I didn't say bat and ball. I said bat and ball. So here is a cricket bat and a ball, like the wild animal. I wanted to have an actual ball as my visual aid for this bit, but my husband said something about it being impractical. So yeah, that's what I actually said. But that's not what I meant. So even if you drew that, even if you heard me correctly, you've still done it wrong. What I meant was a bat is in the animal, the flying animal, and a ball is in a really boring person. This one is talking about the archers and how much her toe hurts. So I've just told you that you've done something wrong and blamed you for all of that, but it was actually my fault. I said something that didn't make any sense. Bat and ball makes perfect sense. Bat and ball doesn't mean anything. I used words that sounded very similar without clarifying, and I used words that sound the same but have two different meanings, and I didn't explain any of that. So it was all my fault, but I still said you've done it wrong, and that's what it's like being autistic. We have problems with communication, but we're always the ones who are blamed for not understanding, even when other people aren't being clear. Being autistic is a little bit like not having a script. This is the complete works of William Shakespeare. So everyone else has got a script and you haven't. Everybody else knows when to start and stop talking, and they know what to say. They know when to arrive and they know when to leave. They know how to behave, and you don't, because you haven't got a script. I love Shakespeare. I actually directed Romeo and Juliet, and the actor playing Romeo, he's not autistic, but he did a really autistic thing, which is muddling up words, which is something I do actually. We mix up our words quite a lot. And his line was, "I'll go along, no such sight to be shown." But what he actually said was, "I'll go along, no such shite to be shown," which was funnier, but it was not what William Shakespeare's written. I've got some more scripts up here, actually. Did you notice this? These are the scripts from the first 3 series of the TV show Inside Number 9. I'm obsessed with this show. That's another autistic thing, having a very strong, passionate interest, and one of mine is this TV series. So my husband gave me these 3 books, signed, by the way, for my birthday. And autistic people are often characterized as being unemotional or unempathetic. And that's not really true. It's because we don't actually express ourselves the way that other people do. So we might, when he gave me these, most people, when they get a present that they absolutely love, will be all happy, happy, joy, joy. And the first thing I said was 6, because I opened it upside down. It's like, oh, 6. And then I realized, and then I just sat there looking at it, and I was stroking it because you can see it's embossed. And autistic people really like sensory stuff. We like things that feel nice. So I just sat there doing that instead of being all sort of jumpy about, which is normal for people like me. We don't always react the way you want us to or the way you expect us to. In fact, I was like that when he proposed to me, when my husband proposed. How do most girls react when somebody proposes to them? Oh my God! Oh God! And they do this, don't they? What's that meant to be? What's that supposed to do? They always do that. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they're all like, all screechy and loud and happy. And when he proposed to me, I just went, oh, I don't know, I suppose, which is not terribly romantic, but we've obviously done something right, because it's our wedding anniversary tomorrow. And coincidentally, we've been married for 9 years. So what's it like being neurodiverse? I would like to demonstrate with an analogy that I borrowed from someone called Maya Hitomi from Structured Success, and I used borrowed in the same context as Ronnie Biggs, the great train borrower. So she talks about executive function using a little ball. Executive function is a posh way of saying doing stuff. So if you're normal, your ball, your ability to do stuff is quite small. So if you have this on top of a hill, it only takes a little push to roll it down the hill. It rolls at a normal speed, and at the end, it's quite easy to stop. If you are a neurodiverse person, your ball is bigger. So it takes more energy to knock it to start it rolling down the hill. It takes more energy to start stuff, to do stuff. But once it's rolling faster. And that's when we're in the zone. That's when we're hyper-focusing, and we're enthusiastic, and we're getting the stuff done, and we're having all the ideas. But then when we get to the end, it's harder to stop. It's really hard for us to change tasks or stop what we're doing. You're only good at football. I'm rubbish. In the before times, I used to take my kid to football practice. And once I kicked the ball into his face by accident. It was so embarrassing. I made his nose bleed. So he was crying, so he had all these tears coming out and blood was pouring out of his nose, and I looked like the worst mum in the entire world. So embarrassing. So you're probably not that bad. I would hope not. You might be all right at football. You might be pretty good. And you even if you're quite good, you're probably not going to go and try it for Man City, are you? I mean, you might be good, but you know, oh, sorry, other football teams are available. Yeah, because you know, even if you're really good, you're gonna, if you turned up, they go, well, you're pretty good, but you're nowhere near good enough for the Premier League, mate. Go in. Oh, and you might be, you know, it might not be football, it might be something more artistic, like say singing. You might be a really good singer, but even if you're really good, I think we're probably not good enough to go on The Voice or Britain's Got Talent or The X Factor. Do you remember on The X Factor when they used to put the rubbish people on to, you know, just so they could laugh at them and say that. So, you know, even if you're pretty good, you might not go on that because you know they're going to say, you're all right, but you're not good enough. You're not, you know, you've not really got any charisma, or you don't have the star quality, or you don't have the look we're looking for, which is something they say, isn't it? So you don't do it because you know you're going to get rejected or criticised or both. And for a lot of neurodiverse people, that's how we feel about everything that we do and everything that we create. We're always expecting that negativity, that criticism, and that rejection. It's like we do get praise, but praise for us is like this this moisturizing cream. So you rub it into your skin, but it just goes into your skin. It doesn't really, you don't really absorb it anything more than skin deep. But when we get criticized, when we hear this negativity, it's like having poison injected into you. So it goes into your whole body and it fills it up and it lingers. It's really quite tough. Being neurodiverse, I mean, even if you're not neurodiverse, you're probably recognizing some of these things that I'm talking about, but maybe not to the same extent. Because neurodiverse people, we're like you, but our strengths and our characteristics and our challenges tend to be stronger or bigger. So if you think about it, like if this is an average, this shelf here is an average of behavior and skills and so on. A normal person is going to be like this, just little waves across the average, but a neurodiverse person is like this. And we're told that as well. So when we're up here, we're told we're too much, we're too emotional, we're too sensitive, we're too blunt. And then when we're down here, we're not enough. You know, we're told you're not a team player, your spelling's not good enough, you're not tactful enough. And so we spend our time trying to get it better, but no amount of trying is going to get us to here. And we spend all that time and energy trying to get to be average instead of working on our strengths and our talents and developing the confidence so we can get even better at the stuff we're good at. And I don't know why we do that, because if your friend had somebody say to them something horrible like, oh, you're so annoying, or your laugh is too loud, or you're too this, or you're too that, you say, why are you listening to them? They don't matter, they're an idiot. Why are you even considering their opinion? You know it's not true, and you shouldn't be paying attention to that kind of crap. And yet, when people do it to us, we take it on board, don't we? And sometimes we say those things to ourselves. I just want to go over neurodiversity and mental illness, because people confuse these a lot. Neurodiversity is not a mental illness. It's something that you have all the time. So if you look at the shelves again, I'm like the same amount autistic all the time, although some days I do feel more autistic. And I have the same amount of ADHD all the time, although it manifests itself very differently according to what else is going on in my life. Whereas mental illness, it tends to go up and down a lot. It's and it can go away as well. The estimates of mental illness amongst the neurodiverse population vary, but they all agree that the rates are higher than in normal people. I myself was depressed for 38 years, which is a really long time. And I had a lot of other mental health issues as well, some of them extremely severe. And you know, after some of those things that I've said, you can see why this happens, can't you? Because we're living in a world that doesn't fit us, that doesn't suit us, and quite often doesn't even want us. So I'm just going to move on to the last bit of my talk, which is why you should care about neurodiversity. So 9 out of 10 organisations don't. And that figure comes from 2 separate studies, one by ONREC and the other by the CIPD. So if you do, you're already in the top 10% of organisations. And why should you care? Well, the simple reason is this. It's money. And I've got monopoly money because I haven't used real cash for about 9 months. Yeah, money. We make companies more money. And how do we do that? Well, first of all, we're more productive. So the Harvard Business Review did a study that found we're 30% more productive. JP Morgan Chase came in with their Autism at Work program, finding that people were 50% more productive. And they also found, they did like I can't remember what it was called, it's called something like Special Forces Project. And they found that people on that project were 90 to 140% more productive. It's massive. And one of the reasons for that is because people automate stuff. So there was this guy at SAP, for example, who automated a process it was taking 3 days and he got it down to 20 minutes. And we learn faster as well. So there was this guy who was an autistic guy. He went for a job interview and they said, do you know Java? And he said, no, but I can learn it. And they said, well, we need you to start on Monday. So he learned it over the weekend. I know. How can you learn Java over a weekend? But he did. And a lot of people find that some of these things are hard to believe, and we get that a lot, but they're true. Is it going to cost you a lot of money to hire us? No. Nearly 60% of adaptations in the workplace for neurodiverse people cost nothing. They're not just cheap, they cost nothing at all. And the rest of them are really cheap, easy stuff. It's things like color coding, for dyslexics, so they don't have to read everything. They just know blue is for that color and pink is for that color or whatever. And you don't even have to splash out on lovely Hello Kitty highlighters like mine. You can use normal ones. And that's going to benefit everyone else, isn't it? Not just the dyslexics. And that's another reason, because the accommodations that you're putting in for neurodiverse people, everybody can benefit from those. Culture Shift, which is an organisation based here in Manchester, they did a survey during lockdown, and they found that 90% of employees want flexible working. So you might introduce flexible working for the autistic people who stay up till weird hours doing their coding, for example, and yet you're finding everybody's benefiting from it. Somebody who's got to take their grand to the hospital, or someone who's got to pick the kids up, or someone who's just got to go to the dentist. So they benefit everyone. And you've got loads of other stuff for, studies on inclusive workplaces are showing things like reduced staff absence, you've got better collaboration, more innovation, and it all leads to increased revenue. And the other thing is neurodiverse people hang around. We're loyal. If you get us on board, we'll tend, and you're supporting us, we'll stay. There's an American organisation called Neurodiversity in the Workplace, and I went to one of their talks, and they said the retention rate for people hired through their program was 98%. I thought that's high, so I emailed them and I said, is that over 6 months or a year? And they said that's over 5 years. 5 year, 98% retention rate, which is extraordinary. But then we are extraordinary people. So that's the basics of why you should care about neurodiversity. Apart from it being the right thing to do, is that we make more money for your company. So wrapping up, you've learned 2 things today. You've learned what neurodiversity is, and you've learned why you should care about it. But there's something else here as well. What's the secret sauce? What's holding all of this together? What do you need to do to make this work for you? And that is, you have to want to do it. You have to care about this stuff, because none of the rest of it is going to work unless you're actually committed to being inclusive. And the good news is you've already done that. You've already done step 1, because you've turned up today. You've wanted to learn about neurodiversity and understand and be inclusive. And that's amazing, because not only is it obviously hopefully going to benefit you and your workplace and everything else, but it's a big deal for people like me, because we've spent our whole lives being told that we're broken, that we're a problem, that we're a challenge, and that nobody wants us. So when you say, oh, actually, we do want you, we want to include you, we want to use your strengths, that means a huge amount to us. It's absolutely massive. I got an email from an old school friend the other day, and she said she was talking to another old school friend, and she said that they were sorry that they'd never realised how hard things were for me at school. And she also said, I'm sorry that we weren't there for you. And I replied to her and I said, well, you didn't need to actually do anything. All you had to do was be there, and you were. You were there for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Really appreciated that talk. I'm aware there's a few questions are coming into the chat already. Have you got the chat up? I think we started sort of the last couple of messages. Is the chat working for you at your end to go through it? I can read them out if you'd like for you to answer. It's up to you.
Yeah, I don't. If you could, are you able to read the questions?
Yeah, no problem. 1 second there. Sorry, I'm just getting this up. The chat function on Zoom isn't fantastic. I'll give that. Just copying a question to, yeah. I found when communicating with software developers on the more impacted end of the autistic spectrum that subtle language differences make a big difference. Is there a systematic approach to ensuring we use good language?
Is there a systematic approach to ensuring you use good language with autistic people?
Yes, sorry, that was the question from Aiden.
Yeah. Yes. Well, every autistic person is different. So sort of striking up the conversation and sort of getting to know them and how they communicate is and how they best communicate with you is good. But if it's a first conversation, most autistic people really like clarity. So erring on the side of clarity is always a good thing. Some of us do nuance and some of us do sarcasm and jokes and things, but not every autistic person. And even those of us who do nuance, we find it's just so much easier if you're clear. And if you want something to just tell us, because a lot of people, they want something, they tend to skirt around it, which and then it can be frustrating for us. So clarity is above all, I think, the most important thing for communicating with an autistic people. It works quite well for normal people as well.
No worries. Thank you for that. There was also another question from Aiden that said, what's the most impactful thing that we can all do to make the workplace more welcoming for neurodiverse people?
The most impactful thing to do? That's a really good question, actually. I think, like I said towards the end of that talk, your attitude is the most important thing, because it doesn't matter if you're putting in coloured pens or speech to text software if you're not going to be have the right attitude that you want people there. I don't want people doing it because they feel they ought to. I want people doing it because they want to be included. And I think a recognition of strengths is quite important as well. So it's not just you have to do this because it's the law. It is the law, by the way, under the Equalities Act, or because you want to look good, but because you actually want neurodiverse people coming in and using their strengths. Because that's something that gets forgotten a lot in the conversation. We're trying to be inclusive and stuff, but you forget that we're bringing a lot to the workplace. And once you harness that, once you start talking about people's strengths and giving them jobs that they enjoy doing and that they're good at, that builds our confidence and it makes us happy. You saw those examples from JP Morgan Chase where the people were in their right environment. That's how well people can work. So that the short answer to that, the most impactful thing is attitude. If you can put a pot plant in, that also helps.
Just a quick comment from Sue that says, speaking as an autistic person, interviews are very difficult. I was allowed some adjustments at an interview to get my current job, and now I'm doing really well in the job. That's great to hear, and I think really interesting comment for everyone to be aware of. Skylar asked, is there a benefit to getting a diagnosis if you believe you may be neurodiverse?
Is there a benefit to getting a
diagnosis?
Yeah. I get asked this question a lot, and it's very much a personal decision. Many people find that a diagnosis gives them some kind of, I don't think closure is quite the right word that I'm looking for, but a sense of understanding. I hear that over and over again, that once they understand that they're autistic or they're dyslexic or they've got ADHD or they're dyspraxic, for example, that gives them that sense of understanding. It can be helpful for certain situations. You don't have to have a diagnosis to have reasonable adjustments at work. You don't have to prove anything. It does make it a little bit easier. If you want access to work, which is a government scheme that gives you a grant for any adaptations you might need. So that could be workplace coach, it could be software, or anything else you need to be able to do your job with your neurodiverse condition. They might ask for a diagnosis. So it's entirely up to you. It could make your life easier. I've never had a diagnosis, an official diagnosis, and the only thing it's ever affected for me is Alton Towers, who insist on a diagnosis if you don't want to wait in a queue. That's genuinely it. That's the only thing that's ever been affected by my lack of paperwork.
Thank you. Jane says, thank you for the talk. Jane has just started working with young neurodiverse students who are gifted with computer skills. How can I encourage them to consider employment when they would prefer to sit at home alone gaming or coding?
That's a really interesting question. I can understand the challenges because sometimes I would rather sit at home gaming than going to work. I find with some neurodiverse people, there's quite a lot of anticipation of fear and rejection, which is valid because we've had it a lot. So I can understand that it's safe at home, isn't it? I think maybe doing something around safety, communicating that the workplace is going to be safe if you're connecting with the right places. And I think instead of saying, I'm not quite sure how your work placement works, but easing them in gently can work, so they can go and have a look round first, so they know it's not going to be awful and people aren't going to be weird around them and things like that. Just getting a feel for it to help with develop those feelings of safety. So when they are ready to work, that's they've dealt with some of the issues that they might have around fear and safety. I'm just guessing there, by the way, because I don't know these students, but I suspect that's where it's coming from, and they might not be able to verbalize that either. They might not be recognizing that it's coming from a place of fear, because we don't always recognize our own fears. And I'm speaking from personal experience with that. We do a lot of avoiding stuff and we don't always know why, but I suspect that's where it's coming from.
No worries, thank you. Just a quick comment from Matty that said, whenever the questionnaire asked if he had any learning disabilities, he says no, because he doesn't want to spend time explaining that he can type but has problems readings. People's idea of neurodiversity is very binary, so he would rather pretend he's fine no matter how hard it is. Interesting comment that I just thought was worth reading out. There's lots of messages saying, thank you, and it's an amazing talk.
Thank you.
Kenny asked, you talked about neurodiverse people being very loyal. How risky is it for a company to become exploitative of the learning Java in a weekend effect?
That's a really good question, and one I haven't been asked before. And the reason it's a good question is because neurodiverse people are susceptible to manipulation and abuse, even when people don't really know they're manipulating them. It's because we tend to be people pleasing because we don't fit in very well. A lot of us, especially autistic people and especially women, tend to put what we want to one side in order to please other people. So that's a great question. But also you want to balance it again. You don't want to wrap people in cotton wool or be patronizing or say, no, don't learn Java in a weekend. People can do what they want. And I think it's developing that relationship with that individual to sort of find out what they want and what they need. Because actually one development thing we talk about for neurodiverse people in the workplace is hot housing, where you actually put them on a project where they're working quite intensely, because some people work really well like that. I work really well like that. So for me, that would be helping me, not exploiting me, as long as you're not obviously paying them adequately and compensating them adequately, and also that you're not doing it all the time. Because one thing I didn't cover in great detail, we can do all this stuff, but we can't do it all the time. Nobody can, and certainly not us. So we need those breaks. That was a really good question, and one I think I might actually put a little bit more thought into for some of my longer talks, because it is a really important point. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Parol, I apologize if I've missed the first part of your question, but the question would say, would it help, for example, if a candidate wanted someone to tell the client that they're autistic so that they can make relevant adjustments? How would someone go about making sure people are comfortable with starting the conversation on this topic? Probably from a recruiter's perspective, I'm assuming there.
So how are you going to get people to disclose? I think is
yeah, I believe that's the sort of question. How would you make someone feel comfortable?
Again, that's another good question, because I can't remember the last stat I read on that, but I think it's 73% are not comfortable disclosing at interview stage. Again, we've had a lot of bad experiences. It doesn't always go well for us. I think if the person doing the hiring makes it quite clear that they are not just welcoming to autistic people or other neurodiverse people, but they've actually done something about it. So for example, they've had neurodiversity training, or they've got inclusive hiring practices, which they say on their website. Any of those little indications are going to encourage people to understand that you actually mean it when you say that you are inclusive, and anything you can say about neurodiverse people already working there is really, really helpful. If you've got some, if you've got someone on a placement or at an interview and you're saying to them, this person who already works here is autistic, this is why he has this, here's a dyslexic person, they have screen reading software. All of that is going to help people be more comfortable and to disclose.
Thank you. Just to kind of follow up with that, Tom, I believe part of your question's already been answered there, but one question that he asked was, at what point in the hiring process would you suggest a neurodiversity was disclosed to a potential employer?
Okay, well, you don't have to disclose if you don't want to. It's the first thing to say.
Yeah.
You do, if you want your employer to make reasonable adaptations for you, it's a good idea to disclose. It's a really, do you know what? I would love to sit here and say, yeah, disclose, everything's going to be fine. That's not the real world, unfortunately. Yeah, disclosing is very much based on the individuals involved and that particular situation, that particular job, and so on. What was the question again, Ross? This is my ADHD.
If someone was to disclose, at what point in the process would you suggest that they do if they were choosing to disclose?
Okay, so if you're going through a neurodiversity hiring program, at the beginning is obvious, but there aren't enough of those around at the moment. I think it would depend on what vibe you're picking up. So if there's a neuro-inclusive hiring process, it says at the beginning, we're cool with whatever. If you don't have to do an interview, you can do placements, stuff like that. Then you would know and you could disclose early on. If you're not sure, but you get a good vibe at the interview, you could do it then, or you could do it when you start, or you could do it 6 months or 12 months. And it really depends on where you're working and how you feel about it as well. I think one important thing is how you feel, because this is about you, this is your life and your job and your conditions. So disclosure is very much a personal thing. So I would say go with your gut. Lots of neurodiverse people are quite intuitive. We're not supposed to be, but a lot are. And some of us are guilty of ignoring our intuition too often, I think. So yeah, I think trusting your intuition can work quite well sometimes.
Thank you. Megan, I believe she says she stole this from Chris, says, I apologize, Chris, first of all, if I missed your question here. How do employers better understand those in their teams who are struggling with mental health difficulties whilst working remotely, as 50 to 90% of tells are non-verbal?
That is an interesting question. How to deal with mental health issues. It is quite tough. And I think regular check-ins can be good, and also not forcing the issue, because what I find, and Sarah Music, who's on this call, she'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I've got a feeling that this came from her, where she asked somebody several times if they were okay. And they kept saying, I'm fine, and I'm fine, and I'm fine. And then eventually they said they weren't. And I think for some people it's very, very hard for people to talk about their mental health issues. So a check-in where you're not actually forcing them to say anything, but you're there, might eventually get the information out that they need. I think offering help and support that they can access without going through you. So just, in fact, at the beginning of the first lockdown, a friend of mine said, how are you doing? I said, oh no, I'm a bit stressed. And without me asking, she sent me a list of counsellors' numbers, and I actually called one of them. So she didn't say, tell me if you want or not. She just sent me the information and then let me follow that up in my own time, which was very, very handy. So I didn't have to have a conversation about that. And I think one thing is looking out for weird behaviour, because sometimes it comes out in a weird way, particularly if we're very stressed. So if one obvious thing is if somebody turns up, you normally turn up at 9 and they start turning up at 11, which might seem quite small. It might be a small thing, but it's a bit of a red flag. Why are they doing that? Are they sleeping late? Is it their medication or something? And even things like appearance. So you can see I normally wear a lot of makeup for my presentations. What if I do this and then I stop wearing makeup and my hair's starting to look a bit lanky? And that, again, it's hard to bring that up, but it's a red flag that I'm not looking after myself properly if I'm not doing the usual things. So I think it's a little bit easier when you know someone. And I think looking out for what I call weird behavior, because it is weird. It's something that feels off, again, using your intuition. Anything that starts to feel off, or you think something's not right there, it's always worth pursuing. And like I think it was Sarah who said, asking more more than once, not forcing it out of them, but just keeping checking in and keeping going back so they know that you're there for them. Like my friend at school, she didn't actually do anything, but I knew she was there, and that does make quite a difference sometimes.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up, Martin did ask for some resources on where he could potentially undertake neurodiversity training, which I'm aware Amy's already replied with the link to Inclusively Tech, so I'll let people enjoy that. Kenny asked, as an extension of Martin's question, how do you think a company could approach introducing the relevant neurodiversity training into the workplace to make it more commonplace, as he imagines it being difficult to break the traditional mindset of some companies who maybe aren't as aware of neurodiversity?
Yeah, again, it depends who you're talking to. I find younger folk are a little bit more receptive to this sort of thing. Some older people can be a little bit more stuck in the mud, and they don't see its worth. So when we're trying to convince people of the benefits, you know, we just say all that stuff I said about money tends to talk, because you know, we can prove the financial benefits of inclusion. That's fairly straightforward. This, by the way, because this is quite a short talk, I didn't go into all the stats and all the evidence and all the stuff about how cost effective it is to employ neurodiverse people, but that evidence is there. It's, you know, anything you spend on us is offset by our productivity and so on. So that's part of it. And also in terms of legal stuff, this is a little bit less relevant, and we don't do it a lot because we don't want to scare people, but legally you can't discriminate against neurodiverse people. Under the Equality Act, it's classified as a disability, and that normally applies when people are in the workplace, but yeah, it's I think for convincing people, money talks, doesn't it?
Yes, of course. No, thank you very much for that. There's been some fantastic debates sparked around neurodiversity. A few people are heading off now. I'm conscious that we're sort of running into the 8 o'clock time. I'm aware that you had something you maybe wanted to give away tonight, Rachel. I don't want to take too much more time before we...
Yes, I've got my book, How to Treat Autistic People, which is basically just a cheap gag spread over 24 pages. And I've got the same joke on poster format. How to Treat Autistic People. This is based on a slide I did for one of my other talks. So if you would like the poster or you would like the book, I think, Ross, you're going to draw somebody's name at random?
Yes, so there are 45 people left in this call. I've got a random number generator here on my phone. I'll just pull that up now. And I'm just going to key in, take that back. There's 44 now. So I will get that up from 1 to 44. And whoever that participant is, I apologize for my order. It may show up slightly different to other people's orders on the screen. I'm just going off the one, you know, that I have on my list here. So first of all, I've got number 10, which on my screen is Chris Townsend. And I've also got number 18, which, sorry, Jane Birch. If the two of you would be able to drop me a message, I will coordinate with Rachel in order to enable Rachel to sort out that giveaway with you. What I'm going to do for the two of you is I'm just going to pop my work email in the chat. And if you can just email me with it getting a little bit late, I'll drop Rachel a message in the morning and we'll coordinate getting your prizes to you from there. Just as I'm, you know, I don't want to keep anyone here too late tonight. Thank you so much for getting involved with our launch event, Rachel. It's really appreciated, and it was a fantastic talk that I'm sure everyone enjoyed. Thank you to everyone who spoke this evening. It's been really entertaining. I've had a lot of fun. I appreciate a lot of people have got, you know, families, other commitments, generally want to get off. If you would like to do so, feel free at this point. I know there's a few people who do tend to stick around and have a beer or that sort of thing, but by all means, you know, feel free to stay, feel free to go. There's no pressure either way. Thank you very much to everyone for this evening, and it was very enjoyable. Right, I need to stop the recording now as we go to the social bit.